According to my Sprint phone, it says it's 11 o'clock. There we go. So this is a session on people that are looking for new jobs, right? So how many of you engage with the vendors, or how many of you stay away from the vendors? If you're like me, you sometimes have a tendency to want to stay away. Truth be told, though, some of the vendors, if you actually give them your business card and actually receive some of their emails, might be your best lead on new jobs, okay? Because they're constantly contacting IT departments across the city, county, state, so they typically know who's on the way out, who's getting ready to retire, where the new jobs are, who's hiring, okay? This is sporadic, isn't it? I could attach it to my tie, but I was giving up wearing ties. So how can we get there from here? How many people have actually thought about privacy, wanting to go into privacy? Okay? Or know of somebody who is in privacy, and they actually clock out at 5. They don't work weekends, things along those lines. Okay, so this will be talk about how to get there, different options and whatnot. Let's go ahead and get started. There is a disclaimer. I'll wait for a half hour for you guys to read it. Okay. It actually looks better on a smaller screen, so if you want to come up here and read, yeah. But anyway, so this is my opinion, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Little agenda. Got to do that so people always, you're supposed to tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, right? Okay? So let's see if I do that today. Okay. How many people are old enough to actually remember this movie? Okay? There's like 3 hands going. Okay. The rest of you, it's an old movie starring Dustin Hoffman, and there's a point in it where he gets some advice, some career advice after he graduates. Obviously, the movie The Graduate, right? So this doesn't have anything to do with him being seduced by somebody else's wife, an older woman kind of thing. Okay? But anyway, it's like, okay, what kind of advice would they give him today? Because for those of you who actually saw the movie, do you remember the one word that he said? Okay?
What are you going to do now?
I was going to go upstairs for a minute.
Oh, I meant with your future. You're lying.
Well, that's a little hard to say.
Ben.
Excuse me. Mr. McGuire.
Ben.
Mr. McGuire.
Come with me for a minute. I want to talk to you. Excuse us, Joanne.
Of course.
Yes. Thank you. I just want to say one word to you. Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, sir.
Privacy.
Exactly how do you mean?
There's a great future in privacy.
Think about it. What do you think about it?
Yes, I will.
Enough said. Enough said. That's a deal.
Okay, so what was it? It was plastics, right? Plastics. Let's get into plastics. Okay. So anyway, so a lot has changed. I don't remember these. I'm not that old. Okay. But supposedly gas was only 33 cents a gallon. Back then they had gas wars. Okay. So since then, at least in the past 3 years, according to the Association of Privacy Professionals, the number of privacy professionals has gone up tremendously. Of course, that's also a self-serving number for them because they'd like people then to become members. Okay, so then their numbers go up. But anyway, so there's in fact an opportunity for some people who might want to get into it. Okay, so the question always comes up about, what's going on with that? Okay, because information security, as we all know and love, we can all say this stuff by heart, right? Our job is to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, right, and availability of data. Whereas privacy, I love this, it's just the claim of a right. Okay? And the old saying, you can have one without the other, right? But you can't have privacy without security. So shouldn't security be more in demand, right? So what's going on? Okay, so we've always had a love-hate relationship with privacy, right? We typically love when we get personalized stuff sent to us, but we're concerned about NSF, okay, big data, somebody drilling down specific messages to me, mass personalization, all that kind of stuff, okay? And then sometimes, not always, but sometimes we actually envy those folks in Europe because if they know or they're aware that a company has data about them, they can actually ask that company to get rid of it. And of course the company does, right? But anyway, in the US, we don't even give people that opportunity, right? If I spend time and money and resources to collect the data about your buying habits, I'm going to try to use that to sell more stuff to you. Okay? So, how did we get where we are now? Because we came from Europe, yet I'm not sure that we're going to go back to, or go to the level that they are in terms of the privacy laws and whatnot. But it's kind of interesting. You're a history buff. The idea of looking out on your neighbor, supposedly for good reasons, is part of our heritage. Right? And then over time, we actually had postal confidentiality. Okay? Before that, you actually were able to open up other people's mail and not get in trouble with it. And of course, anybody who's a history buff of IT knows that the Hollerith card, or the punch card, owes itself to the National Census applications. Okay? And then a little known fact about Abe Lincoln is that he apparently would go down to the telegraph office and actually read the wires and whatnot. So the idea of looking over somebody's shoulder or snooping has been going on for quite some time. And at the same time, we have the Bill of Rights protecting free speech, unreasonable search and seizure. I don't care what Joe and the FBI. Okay, so what they do is always reasonable, so that's not a problem. Yeah. So, Graham Bell on the telephone, they have the first snapshot camera, we get to see all this stuff. And you also notice the dates are getting crammed closer together. Okay? SSN numbers were assigned at the beginning of our job started probably back then, right? 1936. Okay? One. Okay? It's hard for me to remember back before there was anything called identity theft. So apparently 1990, 23 years ago, suppose, was showing up in the press. First notion of a crime called identity theft. Okay? Things just keep getting faster and faster and faster. A red flags rule where you have to put some provisions in place to make sure that somebody's not changing data about your background so that somebody can turn around and use your information for identity theft. Okay?
You are being watched. The government has a secret system, a machine that spies on you every hour of every day. I know because I built it. I designed the machine to detect acts of terror, but it sees everything. Violent crimes involving ordinary people, people like you. Crimes the government considered irrelevant. They wouldn't act, so I decided I would. But I needed a partner. Someone with the skills to intervene. Hunted by the authorities. We work in secret. You'll never find us. But victim or perpetrator, if your number's up, we'll find you.
Anybody a fan of that show? Few of you? Anybody not heard of that show? Okay. It's worth checking out, it really is. I mean, Joe will tell you that it really doesn't exist. It's all make-believe, right? And then you get news like this, okay? So you definitely have a concern as a private citizen in the U.S. anymore, okay? But again, this is local law enforcement, okay? So, anybody? Who is it? Edward Snowden, right? So yeah, So anyway, okay, we'll go a little religious here. Okay, he wants the right side, and who says he's on the left side? So I'm not going to take a vote, but anyway. So that's definitely a religious debate, right, on whether or not you see him as a good guy, bad guy. But we won't get in there. The whole notion of privacy in the forefront. Okay, for privacy being an issue that's talked about, we're there, right? Okay, so. Why get out of security? Okay. Don't you like getting awakened at 2 a.m. and being told that you've got to compromise and you've got to fix it before Monday morning? Okay. I mean, privacy isn't necessarily everything that I think a lot of folks have it cracked up to be either. Well, you might think that it's an 8-to-5 job, 40-hour-a-week job. There are some stresses that come along with it, okay? So a lot of people want to know, what do I need to do to become a chief privacy officer? First and foremost, jack of all trades. If you're dealing with privacy, very much like when you deal with security, you seem to be in the mix, in the middle of everything, okay? You definitely have to be able to stay up at night. You have to be able to deal with issues. Coffee is your friend. A lot of people who are in the privacy field say bourbon is a better friend, but we won't go there. Okay. But you're definitely in the middle of things, and you have an opportunity to either help your organization move faster, be a true enabler, like we always claim security is, or you can also slow things down. So people sometimes want to go around you, very much like security. While being an attorney is not a requirement to be a privacy officer, it helps to be able to understand contracts and legalese. Okay, so I know somebody who's a chief privacy officer at Penn State University, and she actually has experience being a paralegal. So she's able to actually understand contracts without having to represent the organization. So understanding the laws, understanding the regulations definitely helps. Because as you all know, there's just been more and more regulation over the past number of years in the areas of security as well as privacy. Okay? Likewise, copyright, at least for a university environment, is always a fun one that we get brought into. Okay? But Google is your friend. Okay? So I tell people, if you've got internet connection and you don't know something, you got Wiki and you got Google. You can find out what it is. Okay? Because obviously if you read it online, it's what? It's got to be true. Yeah. So other skill sets. Oh, coffee one again. Okay. Should probably go slower on that one. You definitely find yourself in the privacy field in the role of a teacher, trying to explain to people why it's important, why we have to do A versus B, very much like you do in security. Okay? And similar, you are an evangelist. You are a believer. You're the one who's out there arguing for a change, or that we should do A versus B or X versus Y. Okay, you have to be a believer in what you're standing for, very much so, like you do in security. Unfortunately, you also sometimes feel, I guess like security, that you've got a target on your back. Not everybody is going to embrace the privacy officer as someone who's doing right by the organization or the company. They can see you as a speed bump, somebody that's slowing them down. And there are some facts and people who think that being a privacy officer is not the best job in the world. You ever get the feeling that when you walk into a room, some people think this is what they're seeing when you walk in? Very same for a privacy officer. Okay, they think you're trying to sell them something they don't need. It's like somebody from internal audit coming in. It used to be on 60 Minutes. The joke was that if Mike Wallace was walking up your sidewalk, that was not a good thing. Okay, rarely did you have somebody from internal audit or security or privacy come up to talk to you. It's going to be a great opportunity, right? So how do you prepare? I'm still doing it. For me, privacy is very much like security. There's always something coming down the pike for you to learn more about, especially in the area of federal regulation. Okay? But in terms of my personal background, okay, there is not a, first off, there's not a standard path. But for me, I'm a security officer in Kentucky, been in Ohio for about 10 years, but prior to that, 15 with GE and private industry, and then a half dozen with county government. Okay? My background, BA in math, and then I was one of those people that wasn't smart enough to stop going to school. Okay? Two that really, for better or worse, I believe, the MBA and the law degree have been the most valuable to me. Probably, maybe even the MBA more so than the law degree. Okay? The thing that's going in your favor, though, okay, is you probably have seen a move from being very technical to being more towards compliance in the area of security, being a security officer. What's going in your favor is most privacy officers don't know IT. Okay? So get to know your current privacy officer so that he or she has an opening, you can always make the move over. Okay? But you're going to have to learn how to translate. And most privacy officers don't know technology, so they don't have an idea of what in the world an IP address is, or a MAC address, or a network card, just go on and on and on. Okay? So for them, it's all Greek. So definitely help them out, and they can turn around and help you with your career. As we all know, there's tons and tons, probably way too many security certifications, right? I guess if I did a show of hands, I'd say most of you have at least one, if not two, maybe even three of these kinds of certifications. And I didn't want to, I could probably go on for about 3 or more slides on IT security related certifications. The only one I didn't know about was the middle one, the Certified CISO. That's actually something that's offered in the European Union. So if you're heading over the pond, you might want to take a look at that particular certification. Anybody who's a certified ethical hacker? Okay, 1, 2. Okay. Again, 3 or 4 years ago, that cert I don't think even existed. Okay, so they're always changing. Privacy certifications. If you, in fact, want to be a privacy officer, it might behoove you to go ahead and look into these particular certifications. A couple of them are specifically oriented to healthcare, so if you want to work for Humana and whatnot, you definitely want to dig into those two. But there's only 3 organizations right now that certify or have any type of certification for privacy folks. And the one, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, does not focus on any one particular industry. So depending on what industry you're personally going to want to get into, that may be one that suits your need the best. The CIPP, similar to ISC squared, what IAPP did is I tend to think that they watered it down. I tend to think that ISC squared watered down the CISSP by offering a series of variations of it. Now, my certification in information privacy, CIPP, is actually called a CIPP/US. Because they realized they could probably sell more tests, and sell more classes, and get more people if they had a CIPP/G for government, CIPP/C for Canada, and on and on. And then they realized, well, maybe we need something for a manager of privacy professionals, so then they came up with a Certified Information Privacy Manager, CIPM. So I'm a little cynical, and I tend to think that some of these things are being watered down. But in general, the CIPP is the, I guess, gold star. What the CISSP was 5, 10 years ago, that's what the CIPP is now. So that's one I definitely would recommend if you want to become a privacy officer or get a leg up on your applicants against the privacy job. Definitely look into that one. Okay. And then, of course, compliance in general. Okay. There actually turns out to be more general compliance certifications than there are for privacy. So go figure on that one. Okay. Which kind of bizarre. But anyway, again, some of those are healthcare related. Specifically, a couple of ones are risk management oriented and physical security oriented. Okay. But it's at least good to know about the different certifications so you can be informed on which ones people and hiring managers are looking for. Okay. So, do you want to stay in security? Want to go to privacy? Some organizations are actually combining the 2 positions into one. Yeah, I always love that. Was that Tommy Two-Face or whatever? Anyway. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, and I apologize for that. But just in general, privacy is constantly looking at the personally identifiable information and whether or not it even should exist. Whereas security typically looks at how to protect it and whom to give access to, okay? And who's allowed to have that information be disclosed to. Whereas privacy focuses on, like I said, the existence of it and or how to completely eliminate it. Okay, so there's a little bit different. And I believe the slides are going to be available, so then you can look at this and spend, a couple of cups of coffee reading it later on at your leisure. The other reason why you might, or a reason why you might not see the combined positions anytime soon is it's really a little bit premature. A lot of organizations still feel that security is a specialized field. A lot of folks don't really believe that they need a privacy officer yet, or maybe they do just because of a federal regulation, but we'll keep that person down the corner. We can say, yeah, check mark, we've done that, okay? But there aren't that many people who have a background in both. So again, if you're looking at future careers in 3, 5, 7 years or whatnot, you might actually, in addition to your security certifications, go out and get privacy. That way when these positions get combined, by a lot of organizations because they think they're saving money. You can step in and say, I know geek, I also know privacy, now come talk to me. But hell, in fact, choose what makes you happy, okay? That's the real kicker. I tell folks that all the time. Life's too short, right? Do what turns you on. Do what puts spring in your step, okay? Do what makes you happy.
You know what the secret of life is?
No.
This.
Your finger?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean shit.
That's great, but what's the one thing?
You've got to figure it out.
Now, obviously, we know that Billy Crystal's one thing is actually bringing a cow back on a plane right to New York. That's pretty movie. So, what's a typical day in the life of a CPO? Again, like anything else, a lot of it depends. Okay? Is anybody, in fact, in the privacy field right now? Okay? So, you tell me afterwards if you don't think this is a typical day in the life. Okay? First off, you got the typical maturity model, right? Typical maturity model. Most organizations are still in its infancy. Things aren't necessarily repeatable. Okay, so don't feel bad if you're still down in section 1 or 2, because the truth is most people are. Okay? So 8 o'clock, you get an email from marketing. Want clarification on the web policy privacy, right? Web privacy policy. I kind of love that cartoon though, isn't it great? The guidelines are just policies. 9 a.m., you're asked to review the data flows for the system that's going live tomorrow. That's never happened to you guys? 10 a.m. Do federal regulations really apply if it's in the cloud or on a boat? VP of Marketing says he's going to call legal. Again. A couple of guys in privacy down here smiling, right? Because everybody knows that this is what marketing actually looks like, right? So, IT security tells you, sorry, right? Syslogs were deleted. I can't tell you actually who posted that or who sent it out to WikiLeaks. 10:30, you go to privacy awareness class and one person shows up. 11 o'clock, no, we don't have any more money. That never happens to you guys, right? 11:05, you're good lunch. Do you still want to be in privacy? Now, is that typical day for you guys? Or maybe not the 11:05 part for lunch. You might go like 10:45, okay? But in fact, the stuff that security also has the notion that we need you to assess this application. We've already signed the contract, right? That's happened, right? So those aspects of it are very, very similar. Okay? But anyway, so going from security to privacy to compliance, I use it as a triangle getting smaller at the top because typically there's less jobs there. Okay? There are more in demand, people who are qualified and experienced. Okay? So going from that, for some folks, is a natural progression. Now, there are going to be a lot of folks who are going to just love to stay in security, love the technology, love the bits and bytes, okay? And for yourselves, do you see yourselves always staying in privacy, or do you think that you're going to move on to be chief compliance officer, or you don't want those headaches or whatnot? Because it does get more political. As you go up an organization, it tends to be much more ambiguous, less set answers. Things are more in sand and concrete. Okay? And a lot of folks don't like that. Some people do. Okay. So, again, not a whole lot of technology in this particular section. It had more to do with career planning and for you to think about. But we do have a couple folks down here that actually work in the privacy field, and I'm sure they would sit down for hours and hours, especially if you wanted to give them some wood for warm coffee. They can talk to you about what they do and their positions. But any questions for me? Or I can also delegate it out to the other privacy officers. Anything? How'd you guys get into privacy? And you moved from technical world into privacy. Did you do it on purpose, or you mistakenly hit send, or what?
I did it on purpose.
And how long ago was that?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. So you're actually way ahead of your time. Okay? You ever look back and wonder what it was like? But you're here at a security conference. He needs the credits. What about you? Okay. So I think if, see, as young as you are, though, if you've been doing it for 10 years, then you would have started it when you were like 14, right? So how long have you been in the privacy field? Okay. Oh, so you deal with the VP of marketing and deal with the zeros and the tech stuff, right? Okay. Did you like to move into privacy, or did you kind of like it when it was just? Okay. There's somebody back here also who admitted early on to be in privacy. I think he's the one who's rubbing his eyes. Anyway, here's two folks here who definitely have spent time in the field of privacy. One dedicated privacy officer for 10 years, and one who's actually been straddling the fence. So they've got some war stories. And also, well, in terms of certifications, do either one of you have your CIPP? Okay, we got one, and no? You're considering it. So you're currently, it's not required of the job?
No.
Okay.
I've actually been interested in finding out more training for privacy.
Okay. Worthwhile endeavor for you?
I have the IT version, so I deal with the technical folks every day to day.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that in addition to the CIPP-G, CIPP-US, CIPP-C for Canada, there's also a CIPP-IT, which is more IT oriented. But you're right, the folks who sometimes are technical will go get that first and then take the full-blown CIPP. Or, since the person who's hiring them doesn't know the difference, they might not go on to get the other regular certification. Sorry. Yes, sir. Yes. Any other questions? The question was, do I have any experience with European regulations relative to the U.S. companies doing business over there? Yes, but like a lot of regulations, there's a safe harbor provision. So if you're following the U.S. laws, typically you're going to be protected from European investigations, so long as you're considered to be a U.S. company following U.S. regulations. Which, of course, relative to security, what does that mean, right? Your security has to be reasonable, right? You have to be reasonably secure. Of course, we all know what reasonably secure means, right? Obviously. But do you have a specific question in mind?
I work for a British-owned defense contractor, so I deal with privacy here in the U.S. I deal with Sweden, Britain, European Union, and I wonder if there was any specific clauses dealing with that privacy with the EU and the U.S. that I could go to increase my knowledge base on.
The International Association of Privacy Professionals does have, the question was, there are any particular classes that could help expand his understanding of either British or European privacy regulations, right? And yeah, organizations like the International Association of Privacy Professionals does have courses. They have actually conferences overseas and whatnot. The biggest thing that I found out has to do with HR. The data that we typically keep on U.S. citizens in the HR department, we like to keep it forever. In case the person ever comes back and works for us again. Whereas in Europe, oftentimes after a certain amount of time, if I come to you and say, I don't work for you anymore, I want you to delete all my data, they have to oblige. Okay? But like anything else, if there's government oversight, and they're overworked. Okay? So the odds are, if you really consciously want to violate some of the European Union privacy regulations, it'll take a while before somebody catches up with it, but they will sooner or later. You got folks like Edward Snowden out there, so they'll make it known that somebody's not following the regulations. Any other questions? Well, then thank you very much for giving me a call. Go ahead, yes, ma'am.
So I noticed that you have like the pyramid of like clients at the very top. How frequently or how advisable is it to have somebody who does compliance, do privacy, and security?
the question is you notice it's compliance is at the top, and how reasonable is it, or how frequent is it that somebody would have all three, right? I have not seen it happen. Although in a small organization, when you're a security officer and privacy officer, I'm not sure that you're brought in for all the other types of regulations, okay? There's two organizations that I point to as an example of somebody who's taken the need for a chief compliance officer and sort of put it on steroids. One is Ohio State University because of the Jim Tressel firing and the football players selling their material for tattoos. The other one is Penn State, okay? So it's really board of trustees driven. Now, a lot of hospitals also have chief compliance officers, but they're typically focused on HIPAA and the HITECH Act, okay? So depending on your company, though, if you do work overseas and do a lot of export control, your compliance officer then needs to know about the Secretary, or not Secretary, U.S. Department of State regulations having to do with export controls and whatnot. So if you're a defense contractor, you have to then know the regulations around that area as well. So it's very industry oriented or specific, but compliance, depending on your industry, may be more about those regulations and less about data. Okay? So it might control what types of products you're allowed to send overseas, who you're allowed to actually sell, where you're allowed to sell your products, who you're allowed to do business with. So it might actually be more business oriented at compliance level than it has to do with data. Any other questions? Well, my understanding is they got filet mignon waiting for us, actually in here, I think, in a few minutes. Last I heard. I read it online, so it's got to be true, right? So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.